Mark your calendars, friends. We are going to gather this fall at Magnify's Lift Up Your Heart event. Sharon Eubank is the keynote speaker. What an amazing opportunity to hear from her up close and learn from her incredible insights and experiences. So bring your sisters, mothers, daughters, friends, and spend a meaningful Girls' Day together. We'll leave feeling restored, refilled, and recentered on Jesus Christ. It's all happening on October 25th in Sandy, Utah. Register today. Go to magnifythegood.com for all the details. Hello, Magnify friends. I'm Brooke Walker. Michelle Craig, former counselor in the Young Women General Presidency, recently shared this. We each have divine assignments and errands from the Lord. Most of the time, these seem pretty ordinary, but these small and simple errands combine into the Lord's greater plan for us. Close quote. As we go on our own divine errands, doing good in our own circles, we sometimes find ourselves wondering about our impact and if we're even on the right track. When these thoughts arise, looking to women in Scripture can remind us how to stay on course with God's divine designs for us, and that the ripple effects of being on the Lord's errand, even the ones that seem the most ordinary, reach far beyond anything we could imagine. To help us learn more about our personal divine errand from remarkable women in Scripture who lived out their own, we're here today with Kaylen Nelson. Kaylen recently retired after 13 years of teaching in the church education system, which included teaching seminary, institute, and also time spent as a BYU adjunct instructor. And we're eager to learn more from her through this conversation today. Kaylen, my sister, it's so good to be with you through the screen.
Hi.
And hold on, you're retired?
Well, it's kind of, is it a joke? I had a baby and people ask, they're like, are you going back? And I'm like, I don't think I am. I don't think I can do seminary and momhood with two. Anyway, and so then HR was like, okay, so for your retirement, and I was like, oh, oh, I was just saying I quit. But then once they said retire, I thought, well, that's kind of funny. When you're really cool, you get to retire at 36, and I guess I'm really
Listen,
cool.
retirement looks great on you.
It's been really good. It's more just time spent with my little boys. I just had my second little boy, as you know. And yeah, we've just kind of been focusing, hunkering down, focusing at home, which has been lovely. But there, inevitably, there will be other things. But maybe the seminary chapter is closed, and that's okay. That's been a
Well, to
good
that I
chapter.
say congratulations. And that time allows us to jump into this conversation together. And
Yeah.
I know I could just be saying this, but I'm not. I am so genuinely, sincerely eager to get your insights on this. And speaking of elevated titles, right, from quit to retirement, to add the word divine to errand, I thank Sister Craig for that, because women, we love our errands, right? We'll bop around to Target or to the bank. But the idea of a
Complete.
divine errand, it's like a strength in your shoulders, sit up tall and know that
Yeah.
we're on the Lord's job here. It's a really beautiful notion.
Yeah, it is. I love that I tried to pick a variety of circumstances so that we can all see ourselves in these women.
Yes, we're going to talk about three women today. We're going to talk about Rebecca, we're going to talk about Ruth, and we'll talk about the woman at the well. Can you first, as we start with Rebecca's story, could you give us a little synopsis and remind us, for those who haven't been in that chapter of Scripture
Yeah,
for a minute, a little
yeah,
bit about her?
for sure. Rebecca is the wife of Isaac, Abraham and Sarah's son. If you remember, Rebecca kind of comes into the story when she gets all of the water for the camels of Abraham's servant. And when Rebecca's brother Laban is having this conversation with Abraham's servant, she comes in and she hears them like essentially discussing her future. And she says, I'll go. Because the idea is, will you leave everything that's familiar to you, and will you go to this strange land with this strange servant to marry a man who is our relative distantly, who you know nothing about? And she says, I will go. So Rebecca is this like very strong female character from the beginning. But once she goes in Genesis 25, she struggles with fertility for a while. She's barren, but then eventually she conceives twins, and she feels like this struggling inside of her. There's no ultrasounds. Nobody knows it's twins except that you would be absolutely a massive, right? And then you'd have an inkling. But she feels like this struggle in her womb. And so in 25, 22, she says, if it be so, why am I thus? Like, why, if I'm pregnant and this is a good thing, like, why is this such a difficult pregnancy? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And in verse 23, it says, two nations are in thy womb, two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. So she receives this inspiration with her children in her womb about a flip in culture, which is that the younger is actually going to be the one that's the leader. Isaac, her husband, the prophet, is not the one who receives this inspiration, but
It
like
comes
this,
through her.
yeah, it comes through her. That's really significant. And so I do think when we're women and we're talking about our capacities in the home and bearing and rearing of children, this receiving of revelation is super important. So as we fast forward the story, as you know, Isaac, her husband, is about to give the birthright. His eyes are dim, and Esau and Jacob are the twins. He's going to give Esau the birthright because he's the older son. And we don't know all the details. I'm sure Rebecca's had this conversation. I'm sure she's not
Mhm.
left it up to the last moment. But for whatever
Mhm.
reason, she's not being heard or understood or
Or respected.
seen
Yeah.
or respected. And
Yeah.
so she sees that Isaac's going to give this blessing to Esau, and she knows based on her revelation that that is not what's supposed to happen. We don't have all the details, but watching the way she works through this and the way she comes to it, the reality is Esau comes back and he's ticked, and he's sold his birthright earlier for pottage or whatever, but the reality is Isaac can say, "Hey, jerk, you can't trick me out of this," and give it to Esau. But it's like he recognizes eventually, at some point, he recognizes, "Oh my gosh, it took this much to get me this far. Whoops, this really is how it's supposed to be." And he,
Mhm.
at some point, recognizes because he really could have changed it, given the blessing to Esau, and cursed Jacob. This is one point that I just want to look at in chapter 27, verse 13. This is something we have to keep in mind, especially as we're following our promptings. Jacob is nervous that he's going to be found out. And in 27:12, it says, "My father peradventure will feel me and shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, not a blessing." Mom, dad is going to freak out, and I'm going to be worse for the wear. And she says, "Upon me be thy curse, my son. Only obey my voice and go fetch them." So she's taking full responsibility for what she's about to do. She knows she's on the Lord's errand. She knows that that might come with some consequences, but in her sphere, this is the the best scenario she can come up with, and so she's going to move forward, and God honors that.
Mm.
And so when we do that, we have to take responsibility. We're going to go about it peacefully to as we pursue these divine errands, but we're also going to recognize that we have to take responsibility and own whatever consequences might be, because
Yeah, be
sometimes
it negative or positive to
be
own
it,
the fallout.
yeah, own the fallout.
Yeah.
And Rebecca is willing to do that. So I think our wrap up for Rebecca is that we have the power to receive revelation. And we need to
Mm.
act on that. We don't need to outsource that to other people who we feel are more capable, or the men in our life or the priesthood holders in our life. We are capable of receiving it. Clearly, God gives some revelation to Rebecca that he doesn't give to Isaac. And so
Yeah.
we need to honor that. We need to follow that. And we need to be prayerful about how we approach those situations. Yeah.
Thank you. Our next scriptural example is Ruth. Give us a quick refresher with this idea of the divine errand in mind.
So Ruth is considered an outsider because she's a Moabite. So the idea is we can fulfill our divine errands even if we might feel like an outsider. So a little scriptural history, and this is not primary Bible. So essentially, if you remember, Lot and his wife moved to Sodom and Gomorrah, and then they leave as it's being destroyed. Lot's wife looks back. She's turned into a pillar of salt. Everyone dies. Lot's daughters are sad about the fact that everyone who they could have been married to is now dead. And so they get their father drunk and they both conceive. Wow. So then
We'll just
I
move right along.
can I just tell you that saying that in seminary is so dang fun? And the students, their eyeballs are like the size of quarters, and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Stick with me here."
I
Anyway,
love that you notice the moment. You're like, I'll watch those eyes pops and then we'll just move forward.
we'll just casually move forward. Nothing gets their attention better. Anyway, so then from them, from their posterity, comes the Moabites and the Ammonites. And so, whether this story is true or whether this is a story created culturally in order to create hostility between the Israelites and the Moabites, either way, it works. Ruth is a Moabite. She is seen as somebody who has dirty heritage, who comes from incestual, disgusting roots, nothing to be proud of. The Israelites view her very negatively, and she marries into Naomi's family. She marries one of her sons, and then the sons die and the husband dies, and so then the question is, Naomi's going to go back to her people, the Israelites, and for I just want to set up how difficult that would be. Ruth has done nothing to deserve what culturally surrounds her, right? It's not her fault. This is generations ago, and whether it's true or whether it's just a story that's told to create animosity so that I feel comfortable going to war against my neighbor, she has to come now into this society and put herself out there as a Moabite who is thought of so poorly. And so I love Ruth coming in as a outcast, and then Naomi persuades her to go into Boaz, and she does. And I just hope that in understanding maybe some of her roots, the roots of why the Moabites are so hated, we recognize maybe just how difficult that would have been for her to put herself out there to Boaz, and then he reaches out and entreats her, which is such a beautiful part of the story.
So, what can we derive from this example in the sense that, being bold in our errand, extending ourselves even when it's uncomfortable to do so?
Yeah. So I just have been thinking in my own life, what does that look like or seemed like? And with seminary, you can go to BYU for a couple of semesters if you have a master's degree. Long term, you need a PhD, but for a short term, you can do kind of a rotation. And I can't tell you what lack of a pedigree I have to teach at Brigham Young University. Like this is maybe coming from like this is not an actual pedigree. This is just like, I don't have the training to be a BYU professor. I'm a decent teacher, but I'm not necessarily like a Bible
Academic.
scriptorian.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know Hebrew. I don't know the
Oh, you
roots in the
don't?
Greek. And
You
yeah,
don't? Oh,
don't
okay.
you, Brooke? Doesn't everyone at BYU? It feels that way sometimes, and your students expect that. And so it was there were feelings of imposter syndrome, and I'm coming into this position to teach students who expect BYU professor level, and I don't feel like I have the academic pedigree for this. But we
Hmm.
do what the Lord wants us to do and expects us to do and asks us to do, and then trust that He can qualify us, even though maybe culturally we feel like we aren't up to par, or we don't
Yeah.
have maybe the resume.
I had a relational example come to mind, not professional necessarily or educational, but one time I was assigned to, I was in my early 20s and I was assigned to then visit teach, as we called it, now minister, to this woman in my ward. And without going into too much detail, I could not think of a more intimidating creature, right, for this little 24-year-old small town girl to try to approach and befriend. But I remember feeling this pull like, no, 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 keep knocking at this lady's door. And every visit was just cringeworthy and uncomfortable. And I look back at some of the things that she said, and I don't know if she meant ill will or what, but I can't believe I kept knocking,
Dang.
right? And after
Yeah.
probably about 2 months, I remember she was closing the door and she said, well, you can come to water aerobics with me if you want, kind of sarcastically. And I said, okay, I'm in. And I went to water aerobics every Wednesday for a year. And I kind of loved it, first of all.
Good, good. Thankfully, it wasn't
It
painful.
wasn't as noble as what Ruth did or what you've done at BYU. And I
No,
mean
for
that
sure it
sincerely.
is.
But I think even relationally, we can find ourselves in these situations where you feel incompetent or less than or insignificant or even dismissed
For sure.
for whatever reason. And to be able to keep pushing that through the guidance and help of the Spirit, that does take some modern day courage.
It does. But what a divine errand for you to be able to reach out to this sister and to do something like in the introduction. I love Michelle Craig's quote of just like, these divine errands manifest themselves in a lot of ways. And I think we keep the S on that. There's not an
Mm,
errand, that there are
mm.
errands. And so, yes, maybe there are some overarching things, a motherhood or a career path that are big things. But I do see these small moments of ministering as divine errands that, us helping each other along the way. And anytime we're on God's errand. It's divine, and hopefully that happens more times than one.
I love that. I love that. Let's talk about the woman at the well. I always feel a tenderness toward this story, and I
Yeah,
guess in particular toward her, and I can't
I
articulate why, but
know.
there's a tenderness to this, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And I just can't help but the interaction between her and Jesus.
Mm,
So Samaritans, and a little bit of background. Samaritans, similar to the Moabites, women at the well is now New Testament times. So the Jews are there, Jesus is there, and the Samaritans live in between. It's kind of like Jerusalem's in the south and then Galilee's in the north, and the Samaritans live in between. And essentially what happened is because they didn't listen to Old Testament prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel and others, they were destroyed by the Assyrians. And when they were overtaken, the Assyrians kind of mixed the people. So the Samaritans essentially come from like half-bloods. So Jesus, unlike others who go around Samaria, Jesus goes through it because it's the fastest way to get north and
yes.
south, right? We know this. So anyway, he stops at this well, he speaks with this woman, and she's like, "Why are you talking to me? You guys hate me," essentially, right? And Jesus kind of goes back and forth, and as he goes back and forth with her, he says, "Go get your husband." And she's like, "I don't have one." And he's like, "You're right, you don't have one. You have five. And the guy you're living with is not currently your husband." And she's like, "Oh, I perceive that thou art a prophet." And I am like, the exposure that Jesus just like,
Laid out there.
he just like exposes her entirely. And she's like, "Oh my goodness, I think you're a prophet because holy smokes." And then he has this, he teaches her in no uncertain terms exactly who he is in a way that she'll know. Because she has the heritage of the gospel in the past, she knows of a Messiah. So he manifests himself to her because of her goodness and because of her humility. And she then goes forth and broadcasts the message. In John chapter 4, it says this, and this is the after part that we maybe forget in the story. In verse 39, it says, "And many of the Samaritans of that city believed on him for the saying of the woman, which testified, 'He told me all that I ever did.' So when the Samaritans were come to him, they besought him that he would tarry with them, and he abode there 2 additional days." I added the word additional. "And many more believed because of his own word. And they said to the woman, 'Now we believe, not because of thy saying, for we have heard him ourselves, that this is indeed the Christ.'" So because of her boldness in going to testify. So here's my principle with the woman at the well. Sometimes the things that we have done in the past prevent us from feeling like we're worthy or capable or whatever of contributing to the kingdom now. And I don't know how better to paint a less worthy individual based on her track record, which Jesus very bluntly lays
Called
out
out.
on the table. Like, he makes it clear that he is very aware of her shortcomings and still calls her to do something so significant for the kingdom and manifests himself as the Messiah to her, which he has not done almost at all to this point. And then she broadcasts the message and he trusts her to do that. And I think that is so cool.
Well, therein lies the tenderness, I think, is in the uptick, right? It's that I know your shortcomings. I know where you've gone wrong, where you've failed, however you want to characterize that. And I'm going to trust you with a piece of information that will carry my work forward in
Yeah.
a really significant way.
Like unbelievably so. And I think for us, how often do our perceptions of our shortcomings keep us back from fully
Hmm.
engaging? Because, so a quick example, my patriarchal blessing, I got at a younger age. I was 14. My sister was getting hers, so it was like, well, let's do Kaylen at the same time. So it wasn't
Let's hold
necessarily
hands
like
and
this,
jump off this cliff together.
why not? I had no idea. I'm like, sure. And in it, it said, "Kaylin, God is now pleased with you in your life." And as a 14-year-old, I was like, sweet. And then I became a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old and then a very disobedient 18-year-old. And then I would read that same patriarchal blessing and I would think, I have ruined it. God was pleased with me when I was 14, but now surely he's not pleased with me anymore because I have, I don't know, been a regular old teenager and done some things that I would take back. Okay. But like, I really did feel disqualified. And I think one way that Satan gets into our heads is by telling us that we could never be what we could have been had we not made the mistakes that we made.
Mm.
That the atonement of Jesus Christ can wipe away sin, but I think we forget about that's mercy, but grace is the elevation that we don't deserve. And so, yes, I've committed sins and yes, I've done things wrong and Jesus covers that, but and the atonement also enables and lifts and somehow brings us to a higher plateau through I'm a better person because of what I went through as a teenager. I wouldn't repeat it. I wouldn't recommend it to others, but I am a better person because of it and because I've used the atonement of Jesus Christ in various aspects of my life. And so
Yes.
I think that that's something that we see here where we say, don't believe Satan, who tells you that you can contribute, but you'll be a fraction of what you could have been because of what you've done.
Hmm. That's so beautifully said, Kaylin. That is so beautifully said. There's another, I think, aspect to this story that I'd love your take on, because there's an exchange here. There's an interaction between Jesus Christ and this woman, and
Yeah.
we get to witness in that conversation, in that exchange, we get to witness his nature, right? So, what do you think we can learn when we put ourselves in the shoes of that woman? She's face to face with Jesus Christ. What do we learn from that?
For me, it's recognizing that Jesus chooses us in it. That's it. I think sometimes we want to brush it under the rug or act like it never happened or Jesus doesn't know. Like Jesus totally knows and still. And I think that's my favorite part of the story is that she's still called despite it and that Jesus full knowing her whole history. And maybe that's why he does the interaction. I've never really maybe analyzed that until this point of like, why does he expose her so harshly? And
Mm,
maybe it actually is so that she feels like she can go broadcast the message without second guessing herself.
with no shame or no inhibition.
Because if Jesus doesn't do that interaction before and he just says, I'm the Messiah, go tell people, maybe on the way back, she goes, why would he choose me? I
Yeah,
can't. They
yeah,
know what I've done. The people in the city clearly know what she's done. She's got a reputation. She's had 5 husbands. I'm sure she has her, and she can't come to the well in the morning. That's another part of this, cultural thing is that the women go in the morning to the well as like this social interaction, but she's going in the heat of the day, which implies that she's a social outcast and she can't go when the other women go because of her choices. And so,
but knowing that he called those choices out gives her confidence to do
yeah,
so, right? Like
yeah.
it gives her confidence to step forward into those social circles that she's otherwise been cast out of, and with confidence proclaim that he's the Messiah, and to be able to, even if she needed to, defend or fend off any criticisms that come her way, like, why are you the messenger of this moment?
Yeah. Another maybe parallel story that I'll reference from the New Testament is the woman with the issue of blood. It's so fascinating that she reaches out, she touches Jesus, and then Jesus stops to find her. And this one I've thought through a little bit more, and I'm just maybe connecting the dots in my own head. But with my students, I'm like, why would he turn back? Who touched me? And they're like a million people. But Jesus literally, he could have just like gone on his merry way, full well knowing he would have been like, wow, I'm healing people as I go. Look at me. I'm amazing. I don't know, whatever. But he does not. He feels the virtue go out of him. He stops, he turns, and then he looks for her. It says in the scriptures, implying that he knows exactly who he's looking for. And then he goes to reassure her. Culturally, if she touches him, she knows that like, if she's unclean because she's menstruating essentially, and when you're bleeding, you're unclean in that phase of your menstrual cycle. And anybody that touches her is unclean and has to do a ritual bath. By reaching out to Jesus, she is intentionally reaching out and uncleaning somebody else. She is making him dirty. But she has this faith that she could be whole. So she does it. And she reaches out and she touches. And so I think had Jesus carried on his merry way, maybe all along in her head or forevermore she'll be like, did he know I'm healed, but
Mm,
does he know
at what cost?
at what cost to him? And I
Yeah.
really genuinely believe that he turns to go back to her and says, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Why? So that she is totally rest assured that what she did was okay by him. And there's this whole message of like Jesus losing at our gain and him being willing to do that so that we don't walk away with guilt, but we walk away with joy. And
Mm.
all those things I think are really beautifully symbolic of the Jesus that we believe in and that we love.
I could listen to you, if I don't know, it's not a verb, but scripturize. I could listen to you scripturize all day. You're just a gifted teacher. So thank you
Well,
for
I
that. Thank you.
appreciate it.
In conclusion, you've been throwing a lot of maybe extra study and energy toward these three women, these women in Scripture, Rebecca, Ruth, the woman at the well. They all had divine errands. You've characterized those so well and so nobly. How do you feel motivated now to go forward and to do?
Maybe, and I'll characterize it this way, is how do we have the courage to do some things that are really hard too?
Yeah.
And what is it? And for me, it's an imagining. All I have to do is imagine my heavenly parents or Jesus like looking down like, you got this, girl. And I'm like, as long as I'm on their side, like I'm moving forward. And so for me, that's what I glean from this, is watching these women who, when empowered by deity, however you want to attribute that, whether that's coming from your heavenly parents or whether that's coming from Jesus, like being feeling that courage or that confidence to move forward. And it's tricky. How do divine errands come? I don't know, in a million different ways. And they come in ministering assignments and dry mouth and beating hearts and promptings while your children are in your womb,
Water
or
aerobics.
water aerobics. I mean, there's so many ways that these come, and then we push forward and trust that we'll be prompted to move forward. And maybe we
Yeah.
don't always know what those divine errands are. But
Yeah, and in those moments of insecurity, maybe just think of how these women in Scripture might cheer us all on, right? And know that we
totally.
can do these hard things as they did.
Yeah, Ruth's like outsider, I getcha. Rebecca's like prompting that's different than your husband's. They've been there. Or are we like the woman at the well who, despite our shortcomings, like all of these women would say, been there. And I still like Jesus still used me. And so we take courage in that.
Kaylen, thank you so
Of
much.
course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening and being part of the Magnify community. We want you to join us in person on October 25th for Magnify's Lift Up Your Heart event. Sharon Eubank is the keynote speaker, and she is such a force for good. I'll be there too. It's going to be the perfect day to just step away from all the noise and be with women you love while recentering on Jesus Christ. Go to magnifythegood.com and register today.